Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, Two Blokes Chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
That is Colleen Hewitt and Day by Day from 1971. Now, Rob, before we go to our guest, I'm going to ask you a little bit of trivia here. Now, Delilah by Tom Jones had Elton John as a backing singer, and Jim Keys, on his very excellent Boy from the Stars, had Marcia Hines as a backing singer. Carly Simon on You're So Vain had Mick Jagger as a backing singer. Who was the backing singer on that track?
Oh, John Farnham.
We're going to ask this bloke on the radio to see if he knows. Good morning to you, Ross Stevenson from 3AW.
Hello, guys. How are you?
Doing very well. You got Neil here. You got Rob, who's the gravelly voice on the other side of the desk. Can you please answer the trivia question? Which well-known Australian, we'll call him performer, was a backing singer on that track?
I was, Neil.
Goodness gracious me. How'd you manage that?
Well, I was a choir boy at St Paul's Cathedral Choir, and one day they carved off about four of us, I think, to go down... Four choir boys, yeah. To go down to Armstrong Studios in Albert Park to meet the producer of that song, whose first name was Ian, and whose second name was Meldrum, and to record the backing vocals for Day by Day. And I remember meeting for the first time a chap called Alan Howe, who's then the editor of the Sunday Herald Sun, who was an Australian music guru, and I told him that I had had the number one record for Australia in 1971. He looked at me with an enormous look of pity on his face and he said, Ross, I hate to break this to you, but the number one record in Australia in 1971 was Day by Colleen Hewitt. So I was able to bring the news that pre-PE, the way of the Lord in the background, was me and about three other boys, and the first thing we had to do was Molly sort of told us what he wanted us to sing, and we had to break the news. We must have been 12 or something, but we couldn't sing that high, Mr. Meldrum. It's not possible.
But it's extraordinary what you can do with a tight pair of underpants, isn't it?
It is, but yeah, so I'm very proud of that. I've still got a couple of original singles somewhere in the memorabilia trays.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ross, we obviously, everyone listening, of course, listens to 94.7 The Pulse for breakfast every morning, but some of us occasionally sneak a listen into your program that you've been doing now for how long, 30 years?
30 years, probably. I was just thinking about it yesterday. It must be 31, 32, something like that, which just seems ridiculous. The thing that seems ridiculous to me is the age I was when 3AW rang up and asked me to do the job. You know, like I must have been 31 or something like that, which is, it would have been fairly revolutionary for, the talk radio station at that time. So I just got a bit lucky.
Literally half a life ago.
Yeah.
If we do our mathematics cleverly.
Well, Neil and I have been cobbling away a radio show on community radio. We're waiting for that call too, Ross. I'm not going to give up hope just yet that it might come, but...
I was just thinking, if we're in our program, you would have today, if your program was our program, we would have already started on the subject of famous, as Neil started, with famous backing vocalists. I reckon, Neil and Robert, have I got backings for the studio version of Sympathy for the Devil? Have we got John and Yoko?
Ooh.
Vocalists, or have I made that up?
No, you could be right. I know that...
Richfield.
I know that a chap called Winston O'Boogie played guitar and was also the backing singer on Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds by Elton John. And Winston O'Boogie was better known by his real name as John Lennon.
Oh, John Lennon, yeah. Paul McCartney enjoyed doing that, didn't he? Did he produce the Gonzo Doodah Band, whatever they're...
I'm the urban spaceman, baby.
Oh, nice. Nice work.
Yeah. Hey, forget Alan Howe. When he decides he's had enough, you know who your new music guru is.
Yeah, don't worry about that.
Ross, community radio, certainly good for you and many others. What are your memories of it? How did it all start off back then?
Started off just pure happenstance, being asked to do summer programming on the 3RRR. I'm thinking about 1984, 5, something like that. A fellow called Brian Dorr, who of course he would work with John Clark, put together a sort of Saturday morning matinee program, cobbled together. I think the show was called Not the Full Quid, actually. I haven't remembered that name for ages. And part of it was he asked me and a mate to do 5 minutes on the law. So it grew out of that tiny little 5 minutes and then grew into, I was talking to Scorcham, my producer, the other day, and I was saying, you know what Saturday morning on RRR was in the mid to late 80s? Started with Paul Madigan at 9 o'clock, and I know that the Oracle of Bowen Heads is listening, so he'll ring up and correct me, because I can never remember the batting order. But thereafter it was sort of something like Punter to Punter, Could Have Been Champions, Lawyers, Guns and Money, followed by Film Buff's Forecast. So
there's been a bit of success out of that.
Yeah, and the Oracle of Bowen Heads being Ian Cover, of course, from the Could Have Been. Covey and I think Tony Leonard, anyone associated, says the best of those programs was, and you blokes are probably too young to remember, was Punter to Punter.
I certainly remember that, Ross, very, very much. In fact, I had a lunch one day by accident with friends in a little pub somewhere in Fitzroy with Con Marasco.
Oh, yeah, Tony Rickards. I mean, and Turfy and I, Dr. Turf and I are great, we've stayed mates, Dr. Turf, Covey, we've Tony Leonard, over the journey, we've remained good mates.
This whole crazy journey for me started because my daughter, who incidentally is the guest after 10:30 this morning, we're going to have a chat to her, but she invited me onto a program because she started community radio because she was invited into a program called Glossing Over on 3AW.
Oh, God.
And I remember meeting Tony and Trevor Marmalade was there, Tony Leonard, Trevor Marmalade and Dr. Turf. And Dr. Turf, of the three of them, couldn't have been any more supportive of Lucy. He's a 15-year-old girl coming into a studio with three blokes who, people on radio occasionally might have a little ego, and, they just, he couldn't have been more approachable and more supportive of Lucy making a radio debut.
He's got daughters himself, of course, Turfy, and thank you for mentioning Trev's name, Trevor Marmalade, of course. We're still all friends, this long distance down the track, but Punter to Punter was... I remember I was in a lounge room on a Saturday morning in Carlton preparing for I think a grand final in the amateurs, and we're all sitting around and someone turned on the radio. So I obviously was not on radio at this time myself. And I heard this musical introduction to a show where the announcer said something like, "It's clear blue sky, it's 21 degrees. I think we're all agreed what a magnificent day for racing." And I thought, what the hell, what's this? What's this show? And it was mesmerising. They put so much work into it. I mean, that's half the reason that they were so successful, that they really, really worked hard.
Ross, radio these days, particularly the opposition to you at that hour of the day, seems very scripted. I don't like it. You seem to have had a style that's lasted, and I don't know how much work you do behind the scenes, but it doesn't sound very scripted to me. It's just off the cuff, natural. Have you always been true to yourself in that regard?
Well spotted. The way I'd summarise it is as follows, and this is the truth. We have our first meeting half an hour after we start. We have a very strict rule. The producers will do preparation in terms of mapping out the day, but I do none. And we have a very strict rule. It's called keep it for the wireless.
Yep.
Don't talk to me about anything until we're on the radio. I want to hear it for the first time on the radio. I remember a few years back being in New York City, and I was watching, I think it was the pre-game show for the NFL was being filmed. So I stood there and watched it, and it was, reasonably unremarkable. Nice, attractive men in suits talking about football, and they finished. And I thought, oh, well, that's the end of that. They said, all right, that's a wrap on rehearsal. We'll start filming in 10 minutes. They rehearsed the entire show and then redid it word for word.
No good.
No good.
No good. I'm sorry, that doesn't work for me.
Well, there's a bloke who we won't name because it'd be unfair on the wireless because of our extensive listening audience, but he was a well-known television personnel, to use the term loosely, who did some radio, I think, on one of the sort of Novas or one of those a little while ago. And he was doing a monologue about what he'd done over the weekend. When you and Russ get up in the morning, chat, what did you do over the weekend and stuff. At one point during his obviously unrehearsed monologue, he said, pause for laughter. Oops, hang on, I probably shouldn't have said that. I'll tell you who that was off air one day when we...
Just text me.
Yeah, and I thought to myself, no, you haven't done that particularly well.
Yeah.
One thing that fascinates me, Ross, and apart from we probably should ask you about, what a normal morning looks like for you and what time you start, but over the journey I've known of you working with the man we lost a few weeks ago, sadly, Dean Banks, also John Burns now with Russell Howcroft. How difficult is it, he said, looking across the desk at maybe not having Robbie next year, how difficult is it to change on-air partners?
I'm trying to think. I've got smarter at it. For example, I just sat Russell down and in a studio and just started talking. This is, by way of sort of trying to get a feel as to where it was going to go. Mm. At the end of the day, as John Clark used to say, writing's just talking. All you need to do is just talk it out. Talk until you're sick of talking, and then you're probably, that's a training session, that's your aerobics, and once you do that, it's not all that difficult.
Because presumably you'd worked with Russell before you became on-air partners?
No. I've known him for a long time because our children went to state school together, and these children are now 26. But no, I'd never worked with him. Of course, I'd seen him on Gruen, and
yeah.
Gruen's got, a pretty sizable television audience, so he's pretty damn good at it.
Ross, just on partners, I won't ask you to name your favourite. I'll do that for you by saying it was Dean Banks. I think you two were the most natural, entertaining pair that I'd ever heard, but also very different, and I reckon that's why it worked so well. Just a little bit on him, how you came together and what he meant to you.
Well, it's easy to bring it to mind because it was his funeral on Thursday, and I put together a package that was used at his wake. And I had a chance to have a chat with Stephen Beers, a.k.a. Wang, who's the general manager of 3AW, who was the panel operator back then. And our producer, strange as it may seem, our producer then was Andrew Rule.
Oh, okay. Yes, yeah.
Right, so pretty talented guy to have as your producer. Dino was, never heard him say an unkind word, never heard him be mean-spirited. He led by example, and the only time he ever gave me any advice was he said, always speak with a smile in your voice. There's a fair chance that if you, and I'm not saying I do because I'm sure I know, there's a fair chance on 3AW if you speak with a smile in your voice, you might stand out. But he was a beautiful soul, loved cricket, loved lunch. He was the one, now you'll appreciate this, you too. He introduced us to the overseas OB, right? Because he loved an opportunity to travel internationally at the radio station's expense. And in 1993, in those days, you had to do OB from a radio station. So nowadays, you can do it wherever you like, as I'm sure you guys know. It's so easy. And we went to KABC, which was the biggest talk station in California. And he was listening and he noticed that they came back from ad breaks into program with music. So he said, that's what we're going to do. And as you know, if you occasionally listen, that's what we do.
Yeah.
We come back from an ad break with music, and he had an ear for that sort of thing. He was a lovely soul, and he had a gentle good humour, which he appreciated in others as much as himself. I remember him telling me a story of, in his previous radio life, he was interviewing Derek Nimmo. Do you remember him?
Yes, indeed.
I'm a bit young for that, Ross, you understand?
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Mr. Humphreys, are you free? Anyway, he had met Nimmo in Nimmo's flat in London, and they were standing in front of Nimmo's fireplace at his lounge room. They were both smoking a cigarette. And Dean very politely was occasionally leaning down and ashing his cigarette into the fire, until Nimmo eventually said to him, "Not exactly real, old boy." I do love the way that was his way of saying that he'd been ashing his cigarette into a fake fire.
Ross, you come across as very much your own man, very confident, strong personality, but I suppose you've had influences. Was Dean one of those in some kind of way, or who of others that have influenced the style you deliver?
I would say probably my father. He was a very strong influence in the family, and he was a great raconteur, storyteller. He introduced me to Damon Runyon. So I was raised on Damon Runyon, and then when I met John Clark, for example, who's also another great influence, John was a great Runyon fan. So, we had that in common. And when John was alive, I was always conscious of the fact that be careful what you say, because John might be listening.
Yeah.
Don't make an egg of yourself, or don't say something that, not worthy of yourself, because John might be listening.
I'm just making notes on that last bit about not making an idiot of yourself on the radio. I've been perfecting that for 13 or 14 years.
No, it is interesting because you're in a radio station that's well listened to. It's influential. It's probably got some presenters that, like the ABC is criticised for, leaning a certain way. But no one who's ever listened to you would have any idea of where you're at in that side. You've been very consistent in delivering a particular style that's about respect for the audience, which is the key, I think, to good radio.
I think I have an easy starting point in the sense that I have no real interest in politics. I find what we are offered severely underwhelming, so I don't have any interest in it. But I also say that if you look at Australian politics, for every election in my lifetime, which is longer than your lifetime, roughly half the people vote one way and half the people vote the other. So why would you have as a starting point alienating half your audience?
Yeah. No, you've done a very good job of it.
The only consistency...
In a federal election, 53-47 is a landslide.
Yeah. The only consistency being that Anthony Green's computer will never work properly, and he'll always be showing the seat of Bass when he's asked for the seat of Rockhampton.
Oh, I'll tell you what. And despite the fact that it has been demonstrated for quite some time now that Eden Monero is not a bellwether seat, it gets referred to as a bellwether seat.
There was someone who was reading the news on a radio station in Melbourne that I was in Melbourne yesterday, so I caught it on the Melbourne radio station, 3AW I think it was referring to the snowy Monaro part of the world. Which I thought was a white 1972 Holden, but you might just mention that next time you're in at work. I've got to ask this question because I think I asked it of you the first time you and I chatted on the radio. I reckon that was 2009 down at Trinity Grammar School in Kew, where we both found ourselves one Saturday afternoon. Obviously, now that you've spoken to Rob Cameron on the radio, that ticks one off your list. If there was one person you could talk to on the wireless and have a chat to, who would it be?
I've already done it, but strangely enough on television, and that is Michael Caine. But I've never spoken to Michael Caine on the radio, and I think he's getting on now. He's just lived a beautiful, splendid life, and he's fully appreciates the fact that he's been fortunate, but just to have a long chat. One of the problems with breakfast radio is you don't get long chats with anyone.
That would be my only criticism. The advertisements are well and truly piled on 3AW. You do a good job.
Well, I think we were hoping to interview this week, and obviously it didn't happen, so maybe you guys can take over the mantle. A man I share a birthday with, we interviewed several years ago and had to be mindful of the fact that we had to cut it up to 7 or 8 minutes. Elvis Costello, we just had the most beautiful chat and could have chatted to him. He was on for a chat. He would have chatted for hours, Elvis, and I found him fascinating. So I'm going to have a stab here at a guy we interviewed on radio. Once again, I had to do it for 7 or 8 minutes. I could have spoken to him for hours. He was so much fun. I'm going to say his name and you're going to tell me the movie, right, for 2 bottles of the Bordeley.
Righto.
Paul McGann.
Paul McGann.
God, have I got his first name right? Right, there were 2 people in the movie. The other person was Richard E. Grant. And it's a movie I'm hoping you've seen called With Nail and I.
I haven't ever seen it. I've heard of it.
Oh, my Lord. Well, there you go. I've made your day.
Excellent. When you said Paul McGann, I thought you said Paul McCann, who was a one-hit wonder in 1977 with Do You Want to Make Love or Do You Just Want to Fool Around? One of the great philosophical questions of our time.
Oh, my God. That's up there with I got tears in my ears from lying on my back in bed crying over you. It's up there with my wife ran away with my best friend and I miss him.
Yes, I have heard that song. I still think the funniest song that you ever put me onto on one morning, I must have caught you on the radio, was I'm My Own Grandpa. And the Chad Morgan version, much better than Dr. Demento's.
Oh, yeah, Chad. It's, for those who haven't heard, it's Chad Morgan describing the intricate history of his family and the intermarriages and intercollectedness that leads him to the conclusion that he is his own grandpa.
No mention of a dentist in there, in his family tree, funnily enough.
He badly needs one.
Oh, does he?
Ross, just quickly, the other passion you have outside of radio is wining and dining, by the look of it. Some really good shows taking people around Victoria and other parts. You clearly like being out of Melbourne and like what country Victoria brings. Is that another important part of your life now?
Yeah, I love the regions. Down your way, I think, not far from you, Rob, and the great southwest is just a treasure, I think, in Victoria, and I love getting out, and a lot of my friends down the bush are farmers, and I do things and I say feel free to tell everyone else what I've just done, such as bogging my ute and approaching my neighbour Johnny Cotton to say, I've bogged my ute. And he said, well, I'll come down later and pull you out. And I said, that's okay, I'll go and have a nap. And I had a nap. And I woke up from my nap and I thought to myself, surely this ute's got a 4-wheel drive capacity. So I went down and sat behind the drive and looked down and, oh yeah, there's 4-wheel drive. So I put the 4-wheel drive and drove out and said to Johnny, feel free to tell everyone, which he did.
Well, now that you're a semi-resident of this region, as we let you go because we promised you 10 minutes and we've been going 30, we don't have a producer here. We don't get told we're going to have a break. We're going to have a break. You see, that's the great thing about being in a community radio studio. It's just Rob and me. There's an open invitation. Anytime you're down here that you feel inclined to have a chat on the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on a Saturday morning. I know that's a bit like inviting a taxi driver to drive to Queensland for his holiday, but you would be made most welcome for a chat.
Why don't you get me in with the Oracle of Barmaid?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
We'll do that at some stage.
That'd be really good. And just, I'm going to take the
leave you two blokes to it. We'll walk away. Go and have a coffee.
Opportunity to support the local village. You have said some nice things about the Inverleigh Hotel, which is across the road from my residence. So you like that little joint?
It's glorious, and we did a broadcast earlier this year from Port Fairy, and I was fortunate enough to be given someone to drive me home, and he took away from Port Fairy that eventually had us go through Inverleigh. So it was a beautiful drive, and I just think Inverleigh's beautiful, and the pub's very special, and
The residents are dodgy.
From you guys, isn't it?
No, it is very good. It's a lovely spot. We'll hopefully catch up there for an ale with Tom and Jerry, as I call them, the mine hosts there at the moment.
It's a beer pub.
And you do know that Rob is the designated invelebrity because he's on the radio. We have these things in Geelong called celebrities. Well, Rob is the invelebrity.
Well, it'd be interesting, down that. Has Inverleigh ever produced an AFL football?
Or lots of them. Geelong had lots in a short period of time. They had Malcolm Reid, Rod Blake, Murray Whitcomb, Dale Smith, Alan Woodman, all played football for Geelong, all started their junior football at Inverleigh.
That sounds like the 80s, yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
And the current coach of Inverleigh, for 2 bottles of a unbranded brand of wine, because we're not allowed to name it on the radio, his dad played for Geelong and played a handful of games in the reserves at Fitzroy.
A fellow by the name of Larry Donoghue, you would remember fondly.
He's just blown it.
Have one with the man who kicked a ton.
Well done, Roscoe. Yeah. Well done indeed.
That's right. Yeah, and every country town's got the only problem. I don't want to talk too much because you've got things to do. The only problem with having a place down in that neck of the woods is everyone barracks for Geelong.
Not everyone does, Ross. Some of us follow other teams. I don't, actually, given that you're in the mainstream media, I'm not sure that you're aware there are teams outside of Victoria?
No, I don't.
They might barrack for Geelong, Ross, but I can assure you that they do not barrack for Chris Scott.
I have some friends who barrack for Geelong who sound as if they might have a bit in common with your friends.
As we like to refer to him as Brisbane Lions Premiership legend and Geelong coach. A bit like that bloke used to wear number 15 for your lot, Luke Hodge, Lions legend who played a few games for Hawthorn.
Yes, what a player he was. We, of course, on the program we call Chris Scott Christ the Redeemer. The way he flings his arms out to the side.
Yes, he
horror at something that an umpire's done.
One of his many traits that irritates the Geelong fans.
Or based on our segment we had before, we have a segment called The Long Run, as you know, because you're obviously a regular listener. And The Long Run, I basically come off The Long Run, have a whinge about something. He's now known as X the Redeemer because everything at the moment has gone from being Christmas to Xmas.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Very good point.
Yeah, my friend Exifer was telling me about it the other day. Isn't allowed to say the other word. As we say thank you, Ross. I know you are actually officially on holidays to take some time out to do some radio. I know it's a novelty for you, but we certainly appreciate you doing it, and always good to catch up for a chat.
Nice to chat to you both, Neil and Rob.
Thanks, Ross. All the very best.
Have a great break.
Cheers.
There he is, Ross Stevenson, 3AW breakfast host. And all-round good guy for a Hawthorn supporter.
Put him in the Elvis Costello category. I could probably have chatted for an hour or two.
We will certainly facilitate that in the new year. We'll get Ian Cover, Ross Stevenson in, and we can...
you and I can have the morning off.
This is the Two Blokes Chatting radio show. We better hear from some sponsors.